Suppose you hadn't talked with a friend of yours since college, and suppose you'd just written a book about your life, including college and including the friend. Then suppose that friend read the book and you had an on-air conversation about it live. What would that be like? Find out this week and next when Dr. Paul Shotsberger talks with Tilley Shaffer about the stories in his book, Moments That Matter, as well as stories left on the cutting room floor.
Tilley Shaffer is an old friend of mine from our UNC Chapel Hill days. She was a big junior journalism major when I showed up as a little clueless freshman. She's retired now, which I'm very envious of, but still living in North Carolina. We were Facebook friends, and we've communicated a little online, but we haven't actually had a face-to-face conversation for 40-something years until just today. Yet it turns out she's a fan of my books and has already read the Moments That Matter book twice, which is a huge compliment. I thought it would be fun to have Tilley, as she's been known forever, on the podcast to get her perspective as someone who has known me a long time and yet was not familiar with a lot of what's in the book. Tilley, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, for remembering me that I exist.
Oh, you were unforgettable. I until I met you, I believe this is correct, I had not known a woman who went by her last name. And I thought that was so cool. And then you drank Dr. Pepper in the morning for breakfast, and I just thought, oh my gosh, she's the coolest person I know. So one of the stories I relay in the book is about coming to North Carolina as a freshman from New Jersey and feeling like a fish out of water, but then getting involved in a small group within InterVarsity known then as an action group, and you were a co-leader of that group. How did you come to be a co-leader for an action group?
That's one of those things I don't remember. I think it was just seniority. We had the only group in our dorm, I think. It was the only one.
That may be true, yeah.
There was 1,000 people in the dorm, and I had been involved with InterVarsity since freshman year. So it was just one of those rites of passage, being older and so much wiser.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's just the reason why, just because I've been there a while. Not
probably
great wisdom or anything.
It's probably the same way I became president of South Campus Chapter as a sophomore, which should have never happened. For those that don't know or can't imagine or whatever, Chapel Hill at that time was about 20,000 students, something like that. And we were living in a dorm, a 10-story dorm of 1,000 people. And you just feel like you got swallowed up and like, where am I? What am I doing? And everything else like that. And so as much as you felt, kind of fish out of water, when you started at Chapel Hill, by the time we got there, you were pretty comfortable. And that was very reassuring that somebody at Chapel Hill could be comfortable in that kind of environment because, man, it was different for me too. I mean, small town or not. And this may be something else that you don't remember, but nonetheless, I'll throw past you, because I say in the book that the group requested me to learn the guitar so we could sing worship songs together. And you may not remember this. I have a vague memory that it was you actually who, and I also have this memory that it wasn't a request. And somehow it had been found out that I played keyboard. And so I was at least semi-musical. And so there was the scheme, to make me into a guitar player. And that's exactly what happened. That's the most amazing thing about that. I suppose you don't have any memory of that.
Yeah, I don't. But in thinking back, that sounds like me. I mean, that's one of the things that, I don't know, God has given to me in that I encourage people. If I see they have some talent like that I don't have, I wish I had, I said, okay, you got this ability. You need to share it with other people. So I don't remember exactly doing that, but I do that with other people. So I think I probably did it with you. And I love hearing people play the guitar or whatever. I did not realize till you mentioned it that you played the pipe organ. Was that in the book?
Yeah, I grew up playing piano and pipe organ. but there was this secret desire on my part that nobody knew about, to play the guitar, because all of my friends growing up, and especially in high school, played the guitar, and it was so portable compared to a piano or an organ, and I thought, oh man, that'd be so great to play a portable instrument. So that little push, which I think happened in fall semester, then took me into Christmas break, and I had no idea, A, where I was going to get a guitar, and B, how I was going to learn to play the guitar. And bear in mind that I'm still going back up to New Jersey, like on break and stuff like that. So I went back up, and I don't talk about this in the book, thank goodness. But anyway, on Christmas break, and my mom had been with my dad to Portugal to a meeting, and of all things that she thought to buy as a tourist, she bought a classical guitar, and then stuck it in the attic. I mean, literally, she had no intention whatsoever to play the thing, but that's what she decided, that she really wanted. So I'm talking about the guitar, and then she thought, I have a guitar, and I'm like, what? So I started on that, and there was a friend from high school who had been playing for a while, and we went to church together, and this Sunday, I was just like, I've got this guitar, I have to learn how to play it, help, and so he just sat with me for a month, and we just played together for like a month. And so I came back in spring semester, and I was actually playing chords, which is, it's just astounding to think that that's actually possible. But the thing that I need to tell you, Tilley, is that this literally changed my life, because everywhere I went from that point on, I played the guitar. And I've always led worship somewhere that I've been, literally my entire life, so this 40 years gap here, I always, and now I'm leading worship again when we meet as a church, because of COVID. But anyway, so it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I'm very grateful to you. I just want you to know that.
I don't know that I can take any credit, but I will. But you said it was inexplicable in the note you wrote to me about the guitar, and I'm thinking, no, it was God did that just to bring the guitar back from Portugal. That was no easy undertaking. So, how did you do that? You don't put it in the overhead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. My dad was always on my mom's case, because she would just buy the most the oddest things when they would go traveling, and then had to haul it back, or something would happen. Like they were in Mexico at a conference, and she won a raffle, and the raffle was a haircut, like a stylist cut, while she was in Mexico. Okay, now you have to know this about my dad. He was so traditional. It was like, this is the way I like it. It will never change, meat and potatoes, that sort of thing. And Mom had super long hair, but she would put it up into a bun. Mm-hmm. And that's how she wore it, Well, this hairstylist got a hold of her and just chopped it. Just like shoulder length hair. And she came back from that, and my dad lost his mind. And she was months growing that back. I can't even imagine what she was thinking, or what the stylist was thinking. But anyway, so these kinds of things happen all the time, which is kind of interesting. But in this particular case, it really benefited me. So you mentioned that somehow you never knew the story of how I actually got to Chapel Hill, and that you just assume I'd be in the Navy for a career after I left college, which was my assumption too, as you read in the book. What did you think of the odyssey that I relayed in the book about how that goal changed over time?
When I was reading it again the second time, I was surprised the first time. And You make it sound as though this was never, ever your desire. Was it ever your desire to be in the Navy, or you just following what you thought you were trying to make your dad happy?
I truly believed in my heart that was my own desire.
Okay.
I think it had just been planted so deeply by my father that I couldn't discern between, my wishes and his wishes at that point.
But when I look at that and you talk about, you make it sound like that you weren't seeking God's will in your life. And the Paul that I knew in college, you were so godly and you were always looking for God's direction in your life. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that you weren't in this case either. You mentioned in the book, and I've seen in my life, God's grace. I mean, all this is part of that weaving together of your life. And I feel like you think, oh, I didn't look for where I was supposed to be. And maybe there were some times when you weren't supposed to be there. And I felt so bad. You sounded some really challenging times. Mm-hmm. And I was, even the ROTC guy, I mean, I was like, oh man, if I'm not even treating Paul that way, how awful, because you're so nice and sweet and everything. And I was like, and I had no idea even then that it was difficult for you. I just saw you as this disciplined person and, doing what you needed to do. And I admired all the people I knew in ROTC. I saw them running up and down those steps. Mm-hmm. Literally mm-hmm. running. Was it Keenan Stadium? I thought, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just feel like even though it was hard, and then looking back in your life and seeing when you were not working, I think it was when you had moved back to Chapel Hill, but that Naval Reserve money got you through.
Yes.
So
yes,
if you'd been in the Navy, that wouldn't have happened. Now, maybe your time frame would have been all different, but when maybe you would have started teaching, but all of that was, I just feel like you were looking for God's will in your life. I don't know. And that sort of contradicts, I think, some of the stuff you were saying. But the Paul I know, I do not know. I just can't see you just saying, going off on your own without asking God. It's just sometimes it's hard to discern, okay, because this is what I want to do, or is this what God wants me to do? And he always, brings us back. You actually have the redirects from God. I think that was a phrase you used in the book, and I really like that. And I know in my life I've made some choices that were obviously not godly, but somehow, he gets me back. Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah. I just felt like all of that was part of the plan for you, but it just had to be. I just hate that it was so hard.
Yeah, I mean, and especially that first semester, well, the first year, but the first semester, that guy is unnamed, the battalion commander, but Jack Sparks, if you're out there listening, I just want you to know that I actually appreciate all the discipline you taught to me. FYI, Tilley, at the end of that year, okay, when he was getting ready to graduate, we had this big to-do with ROTC. It was some big dance and everything else like that. And I didn't have a ride there. And he offered to come and get me. And I was just like, wow, and so actually we sort of parted on really good terms. Yeah, so that was nice. But I was terrified of him when this was all going on. I mean, nothing is wasted, as I say, and and I hope I don't come across as having regrets, but I do. There's been a lot of realizations. How about that? About kind of where did those desires come from? And I realized that, to at least to some extent, they were kind of external to me. Until I finally got that sense of, the teaching thing, and then it became a little bit more internalized. So let me ask you about you, since you mentioned that some of the redirects and that sort of thing. What about that idea of the clearness committee moments? Did that resonate with you, like in your own life? And have you had that kind of moment? Can you talk about any? I mean, if you want to, about any of that.
Well, I looked back, I think back, and I'm thinking, God, I never, like you tell in the book how God told you were going to marry the woman that you married, and he told her that too. I have never had God do stuff like that. I'm thinking, what am I not doing right? But the 2020, which is this year, that's a hard, bad number now. But the hindsight, I look back and I could see them. There was a few times when I had like visceral of experiences with God, in that there were at least 2 times when I had great anger and negative feelings toward individuals. And I mean, that lasted years, literally, some of them. And just praying, God, take me away, take it away, take it away. And then like suddenly with circumstances and things that I learned about these people, it literally lifted. I mean, I felt it. That was a really clear thing, like this burden was physically lifted from me. The other time, it was similar to your experience. I majored in journalism, and you act like that was, a big journalism major. I did not really know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. When I was little, I wanted to be a teacher. I even had a classroom set up, but that went away. I really didn't. That was what girls could be, teachers or nurses, when I was growing, my age group. But my uncle was saying, because I liked to write some, and he was an advertising person. He said, you should major in advertising. I said, okay, I'll do that. And I always wanted to go to state because that's where all my family went. I was a state fan all my life. And then one year, my junior year in high school, our class went to some lecture series at Carolina, and it was in the building that where Bible Church was. I can't remember the name of that.
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
I can see it, but I can't name it.
Right in the middle of campus. No, Actually, it was in Memorial Hall. It was a big meeting. So we were at a big meeting. And at that time, you could see out the windows. I think they're closed up now where you can't see outside. And I'm listening. It was on the Industrial Revolution. It was some just really boring thing. And I'm looking out the window, and it's spring in Chapel Hill. And there is nothing like that. The dogwoods are blooming. I'm saying, I want to go to school. It's so pretty.
I don't want to go to a place that has so much brick. Yeah.
But that's why I ended up at Carolina, and I majored in journalism because my uncle said, why don't you major in journalism? But my junior year, after I'd taken and I was in the advertising sequence, and you had advertising and news writing. Even though I liked to write, I wasn't particularly gifted in it. I knew I didn't want to be a reporter because I just didn't have that assertiveness that you need to insinuate yourselves in people's bad moments of their life. And the advertising sequence, I just was very uninspired. I knew this is not what I thought it was going to be. I had this moral conflict, like, do I really want to be writing advertising, trying to get people to buy things they don't need or want, really? But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just said, well, I'll get my degree. And I got my degree. And I still don't know what I want to do. But I'm retired now, so it doesn't matter. God figured it out for me. And I had a pretty, it took a while to get there, but I had a fulfilling career. And I did know that I wanted to make a difference in people's lives in some way. So I was a VISTA volunteer after college. And I think in little ways, nothing big. I've not been world changing, but maybe made a difference in some people's lives, maybe.
Sure. And you were employed with the Employment Commission, right?
Employment Security Commission. So my job, I was, after being a VISTA volunteer, I worked with low-income people in South Georgia for a year. And I was doing PR stuff and writing and liked it. When I came back, there was a recession going on, hard to find jobs. Everybody wanted 2 years experience. I had 1, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I floundered around, and all my college friends were going with their lives, being very successful in law school and med school. And here I was, ended up Virginia Beach working in a convenience store. So it took me a while. So I went to the employment service is the unemployment office, but at in North Carolina at the time, it was employment service and unemployment. So I got a job with them, and my job was helping welfare recipients find work. Mm-hmm. So I had to put on workshops and stuff. And since I knew what it was like not to have a job, I was very empathetic with them. Mm-hmm. As a VISTA volunteer, you have no pay. So I was actually on food stamps, which gave me great empathy because you don't get money. You give a stipend. It was like $300 a month, and they don't give you a place to live. There's no dorm.
Boy.
So I had a lot of empathy, and God used that. So anyway, and I was in northeastern North Carolina, which was the highest unemployment rate in the state. So, but it moved on, and I did get to sort of teach in my workshops, and eventually later in my career went to Raleigh and oversaw programs, and I was teaching. So I did workshops and developed training programs for our staff. So,
all right. So that original vision of teaching actually was realized, huh?
I guess so, yeah, in a different way. And then at Carolina, in the dorm, I was a social chairman for our floor. What floor did you live on?
I lived on a couple different floors. I lived on second when I first got there, but then I wound up on seventh.
So I was on seventh floor 3 years, and I was a social chairman. And my junior year, I was a social chairman for the dorm. I learned how to coordinate and do parties and stuff, and I used that in my career in coordinating events. That was part of what I did, coordinate my workshops and the Training Institute and all this stuff. So anyway, I got that from my experience in James.
Well, I've always thought that you had the gift of encouragement. And one of the things that is said about that gift is that it's a party looking for a place to happen. And so that's actually one of the ways I would describe you, because, I mean, honestly, you just have to understand as a freshman, you were a force to be reckoned with. And it was just like, wow. I mean, just, this is what life could be like. This is actually pretty amazing. And I will say, by the way, in your defense, even though you don't want to say anything about being a journalist, that the journalism school at Chapel Hill at that point had one of the best reputations in the country. So that was yet another reason why I was just like, yow, this girl. So, yep, I was really impressed with you.
You were fooled. There's really nothing to be impressed about, but great.
Well, I don't think so, but then again, that happens to freshmen. It's okay.
Thanks for listening to Moments That Matter, a podcast that looks at the moments in our lives that come along from time to time that have consequences long after the moment, especially those moments that have to do with the choice of vocation. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation, Parker Palmer speaks of a clearness committee in the Quaker tradition, wherein a group of older, wiser people ask questions of someone considering a life choice as a way of clarifying the next step. We may not meet with a committee about these big decisions, but we all have these critical junctures in our lives, which we can think of as clearness committee moments. We need to pay attention to these moments because they are profound and potentially life-altering. We'll relay stories from our lives and interview others about theirs, especially noting the clearness committee moments, those we choose to recognize and those that were sadly ignored, those decisions that were made with God in mind and those that were not. Our hope is that these podcasts will cause you to think of the same kind of moments in your life with new clarity.